Hello everybody, this is another installment of the Phalcon REST API with Phalcon version 6. In the previous two videos we started setting up the application folders, and we also managed to create a hello world out on the screen using the micro application. We also did some work with regards to the routes to simplify setting up routes and having the container do a lot of the work for us. So today we're going to continue with more optimizations and setting up more routes, and if we have a little bit of time we're going to do some of the middleware that Phalcon uses. Note that the middleware that Phalcon uses is not the same as the middleware as defined by PSR 15 I believe. So it is a little bit different in terms of sending responses and having the middleware work for our application. In later videos of these series, we're gonna attempt to use the PSR response system, PSR 7, as well as the middleware, and try to make this application work with platforms such as Wool, Roadrunner, and so on and so forth using the PSR 7 responses. But let's get started. We have a couple of optimizations that we can do immediately. We actually see in here that we're calling an action, we're getting this service from the DI container, and then we're calling the action on it. What we could do is, to simplify this, would be something in the lines of container get handler, and now we have it encapsulated in parentheses. It's going to be instantiated, and then we can either put the parentheses after that or call invoke. So this code here would do exactly what this code here does. We have another option as well. If we go to the container part, we're trying to find our action, which is this one, get service hello action. That's what we're going to call. If you remember, we're going to call the hello action. And what we can do here is we can have this service here working for us, but we want it to call invoke. So what we can do, this is another feature of the DI container. We can use the calls. Sorry, that's the wrong place. It's here, after arguments, here. Calls, and then that one will accept an array, and then the first element would be method, and that method would be invoke. So what the DI container is going to do is start by trying to construct this action. It's going to understand that there is a service that we need to inject here and here. It's going to go and create this service, and then it's going to create this service here, the responder, and reminder, the responder has its own definition that it needs the response, so it will inject the response before it creates the hello responder. And then once this whole thing is done, then it's going to call the method invoke on the object before it returns it back. So our code here, the way it is defined, can change to this. Just like that, container handler, get handler. If we go to our browser, and I'm using view source here, it makes it a little bit easier to see. If we keep on refreshing, we see numbers coming back on the dates. That means that our code is working just fine. So we could utilize this. And the reason I'm changing all these definitions and how we can call different things is not only to show you the different ways that you can utilize the DI container or have different methodologies in terms of your coding, but also to slowly go through the process of how we can standardize certain things, and then when we standardize said things, we can centralize execution in one area or not. For instance, one of our standardizations was to make an array that will allow us to define elements in there that would set up our routes. So the get method here would be invoked in the pattern slash, and then it will call the hello action. Of course, we're going to change a lot of this as we go along, and we're going to make sure that everything is as expected. Now, in an effort to get everything standardized, it's always good to have an interface so that your methods understand what is going on. So the hello service is a class, for instance, but this hello service is one of many services that we will require to have to make our application. So if I were to have a standardized way of defining what an action should receive in the constructor, it would make sense to use an interface. So let's have a look how we can do this. But before we do that, let's standardize a couple of things that we would require. So one of the interfaces that Phalcon v6 uses for domain objects is an interface for the payload. And I'm going to browse here in the vendor folder instead of going just to the code of Phalcon, and I'm going to show you right here. So under this domain folder, we have two classes, the payload and the payload factory classes, and those implement the payload interop domain payload interfaces. What this does is it creates an interface of the data that needs to be transferred from the domain to the responder. This is just the payload that the domain produces, and it's been taken and it's been given to the responder so that the responder can do whatever it needs to do. Now, this is not a data transfer object. So you're not transferring data, let's say, from the database to your domain and so on and so forth. The domain payload can contain one or more domain transfer objects. It's just the means of transferring data from the domain to the responder. We do have these classes, the payload and the payload factory, of course, creates a new payload in Phalcon, so we're going to utilize those. Okay, so here in the hello text responder, I should not be receiving a string payload. I should be receiving a payload object. And here in the hello service, I should not be emitting a string. I should be emitting a payload object. So for the time being, let's make a slight change and use the domain payload of Phalcon to work with this. So for starters, this function invoke will return a payload, and now in the return we need to make sure that we return the correct object. So return new payload, and we have to produce the code as well as the results, whatever we need to get. So let's use one of the interfaces that has some definitions there. I think it's domain status. There you go. And the status would be what can we do? Let's say success. Alright, that one is the actual word success. And then the second parameter will be an array, And in this array, we're gonna name results equals, and then we're gonna copy this hello world. And that will close. And you see now we're gonna return an object, a payload object, and this payload object will be put into the responder, and then the responder will pick up the stuff that this object has and make sure that the response is emitted the way it should be emitted. Now, reminder, some hello services might return a string, some of them might return an array, some of them might return anything we can think of, maybe a date or an integer and so on and so forth. Trying to set up an interface for services with calling invoke to return whatever we think of, you can do mixed, but then you're restricting yourself because you don't really know what's going on from service A to service B. By having this payload class, you know exactly what is being returned all the time, and then the responder is the service is responsible for creating the correct content, the correct results that would be put into this object, and the responder will be responsible for picking up those results, that payload, and just sending it back to the browser. So in the hello text responder, we need to make a change, and now all we need to do is payload here equals payload, and of course this is going to be rudimentary. We're not going to do anything else, anything crazy. We can deal with the exceptions, errors, and so on and so forth later on, but for the time being, what we can do is we can just say result equals payload get result, and then we need to do contents or content equals the results or result. How did we name it? So from the hello service we have results, the plural. Okay, so we're going to get results here. So what we're doing again is here we're creating an object, we're throwing an array into it with the node results and then whatever our message is, and the responder is picking up that object, it's getting the internal array, the get result, and then we're picking up the node results, which will be our text, and then all I have to do is just set it here. So if we look at our browser, we should be getting numbers again. All we did was change the transport from the main to the responder. Now, of course, this set content requires a string, and we do know that the results is a string. So what we have to do is we have to put a doc block here. I'm just going a little bit into the PHP stan side of things. If I run this, it's going to complain. Here in the hello text responder, parameter content expects string mixed given. PHP stan doesn't really know what this is. It doesn't know what type it is. So in order to help it, because we know, we can do this. We can make sure that the variable content is going to contain a string. So now if I run PHP stan again, no errors. And this is again Composer analyzes with the scripts that we have created in a previous video for Composer to help us. So we've got everything done here. Well, how about we create an interface in order to be able to play around with all these things. For starters, we need to change this invoke. This should be response interface, and then that would be the response, and we can have response interface here, and then also the hello service, we have payload, We can actually change this to domain interface, but for now we can just leave it as payload. And in the get action, there's nothing here for now. We're going to come back to the get action in a minute. So let's create under domain a folder called interfaces. This is just arbitrary how I put them in there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should do the same, but this is my method of organizing. So in here, what we're going to do is let's create what we're going to call the domain interface. Alright, let's paste our little dot block here. It's going to be interfaces. And the domain interface, what it will do is it would actually give us the signature of every service. So hello service is a domain function. So what this will do is public function invoke, and that would return a payload. That's my interface. Now if I go back to hello service, as you can see, the public function invoke returns a payload. Well, very easily I can do this implements domain interface. There we go. And now in the get action, this hello service becomes a little bit different because it can be a domain interface. Actually, what I can do is I can take these read-onlys out of here and put it up here because I can make the class. So this service can easily be changed to domain interface, and that would not affect our code at all because we're just printing numbers here. So let's have a look at the responder. The responder interface that we want to create, we can forget this constructor, but the invoke will be that it receives a payload object and it returns a response interface. So that's going to be what our interface would be. So let's clone this. Responder interface. And our responder interface receives payload and returns the response interface. There we go. So now in the hello text responder, if you look, we receive the payload, we return the response interface. We can now do implement responder interface, and also go to the action and change this guy here to the responder interface. Again, if we go back to our app, it keeps on returning numbers, so it keeps on executing. Now there is a reason why we did this here. Remember I mentioned that we're slowly moving into making things more uniformed and grouping things in and trying to move code so that it executes only once but can serve many purposes. By using this kind of methodology, by using the interfaces, now any service that I have, hello, goodbye, anything that I can put on users, companies, so on and so forth, any service can be served by this class, because my actual input is going to be of a domain interface and a responder interface, and that can be any of these classes here, the hello service or the goodbye service or whatever service I have, as well as the hello text responder, hello whatever responder, and so on and so forth. So by injecting these two, all I'm going to do is run things over here. All right, so let's have a quick look about standardizing this part here. Now, last time around, I tried to in the video I tried to make it work in one line, but called brain fog or whatever, I just didn't do it. So I chose the easiest way. You copy the variables and then you call invoke on them. But what we can do is we can rewrite this to as follows. So it will be this responder, and then that would be invoke, and then that invoke needs to have the output of the service. This service invoke. So it's actually 2 underscores, so otherwise it doesn't find it. So the responder is gonna be invoked with the output of the service. So these 2 lines do exactly what these 4 or 5 lines do. Now we have an issue here, because if I put it back, the responder here was returning the response, and then we were sending the response from this action. Now in the ADR pattern you shouldn't, because the action is not responsible for sending the response. The response is only to be sent by the responder. So this piece of code was not really following what we need to follow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the send. Let me copy it first, and I'm just going to leave it like this. Now that we removed the response sent from there, if we go back to our browser, we're going to see nothing, because there's nothing to send the response. Our application didn't do that. So we're going to move the sending to the hello text responder. Reminder that as we're coming in from the index.php, the route gets matched, and then this class is being called, and then the 2 services are being injected to it, the hello service and hello text responder, and then they're being called. In the hello text responder, we're setting the content. So for the time being, what we can do is we can actually send the response here. And that will ensure that our code executes. So now you see stuff coming in. We're going to work a little bit on sending the response back. Where can we send it? And the goal is to have one area where the response is sent to the caller no matter what. Okay. Just a quick reminder, the minute we did this change here, now this one becomes a class that I can use for any action. So I could potentially change my my routes or my DI, and just have this method serve any action that I want. So if you see here, what we're doing is we're saying get and then hello action. But what if we, instead of sending the handler of hello action, what if we just send the service and the responder, and then this one here was responsible for just picking it up and calling it? That is something that we can work on certainly a little bit later. But what we could do also is we could have an interface for this. It's a little bit overkill, but let's do it either way, because you might want to create a different action that would have additional things in here to help your application. So let's create now an action interface. this action interface would have what? Would have just an invoke with void, because that's what we want. And now the get action implements action interface. There you go. Now this was a little bit of an overkill, but it's fine just to have it here. We can remove it later on. It doesn't really affect us. But here's the interesting part. What if I take this get action here and I just make it one class that would allow us to handle actions? So it will be something like a handler of actions. We could certainly move it to a middleware, to be somewhere where it's going to handle all the actions as they come in. But for now, let's create a new class that will encapsulate that, and that's going to be the class that will be run all the time in order to produce results for us. So if I copy this and go under services and make it action handler, let's name it like that for now. There you go, it's my action handler. It's going to do exactly the same thing that I wanted to do as the get action. So how can we change our container to cater for this? So remove the get action but still have everything working. So for starters, for the action to work, we need the service and we need the responder. So let's change our array here. Let's call this service, and that one will be container. Hello service, and responder equals container hello responder text. Alright, so we got these two here, and we're going to remove the action. So I'm just commenting it out now. So how would that work if we have it? So let's have a quick look. Service equals container get service. Actually, that's not going to work very well. Service name. There you go. So we need service name equals route service, and responder name equals responder. This is what we need to get from the array up here. And we said that we're not going to worry about the handler. So in my anonymous function, I need to inject service name and responder name. If I go container get service name, immediately I am going to get the hello service from the DI container. And if I do responder equals container get responder name, I'm going to get my responder. So in order for me to do exactly the same thing that I was doing before, I need to do now action equals new, and we're going to call action handler, and that one will require the service, which will be the one at the top, and the responder, which would be the one at the bottom. And right after this, all we need to do is action invoke. So with this change, we're not getting any more the name of the name of the action. We just need the name of the service and the name of the responder. If I refresh my page, I should be getting numbers. And also, while we're at it, let's have a quick look at PHP stan. And I do expect issues. Oh, okay. That's weird. I was expecting issues here because the container service name and the responder name are not defined. If you look here in the issues, it says here parameter service of class so and so expects domain interface mixed given. So PHP stand doesn't really understand what's going on. So in order to help it, what we're going to do is we're going to put a little variable here that will be domain interface, and then another variable here, responder interface. So now all those issues are gone, and of course no errors are being reported, and our code works, which is great. Now what we did is we removed the handler completely. So let's go to our container, and we don't really need this handler, the hello action, anymore, because we're perfectly fine in creating whatever we need to create. So down here we no longer need this hello action. So let's have a quick look now what we can do. Also, this hello action can go away. Let's have a quick look now how we can leverage anything else that we can leverage in order to make this even more streamlined. For starters, we can get rid of this hello, and in the action we don't have anything, so probably we're going to be able to remove this this folder completely. As far as the responder is concerned, right now we have been printing out just text, but for an API usually we want to print out JSON. So in order for us to make that change, we need to make sure that we send JSON data back and it is printed out as expected. So let's create a structure where we can generate the payload at any given point. Okay, so the idea that I have is to have a node that would be something like this. Let me just create a new JSON file here so I can show you. Alright, so it's going to be a JSON payload. What I'm thinking of is, and of course this will depend on how your application is structured, right? So I was thinking about a data node, and then an errors node, and also a meta node. Now, what would each of those do? Well, data is self-explanatory. It's going to contain the data that the response has. Errors will be when we do have errors, you're going to have an array of whatever errors came back. The meta, I think, should be one of the best ways to identify what's going on. So what I want to do here is I want to have a node that says code, and that could be let's say 200 or something like that. It could have message, will be a very short message, success, and then underneath we can have additional pieces of information. I know especially people that work a lot with JavaScript really love these little messages here. The message equals success. They even search for it. So what I want to do here, I want to have something that will identify this, and of course it's timestamp, because we need to have the correct timestamp of where something is happening. So 2025-09-13, and what's the date that was printed out here? Let's put that one. There you go. Let's keep this one. There we go. And also what I want to do is I want to have a way for the receiver of this payload to verify that it is a correct payload. So what I want to do is I'm going to create another node, which is called the hash. That's how I'm going to name it. Somewhere here, or maybe here, just to keep everything sorted alphabetically. And the hash will be something like A, B, C, D, E, whatever. This could be an SHA-1 of the data and errors. So if you want to validate this, all you have to do is just get the hash, then do an SHA-1 on these two, and then that would be you'll be able to get it sorted out or validated if you like. So this is what I'm thinking of to create, and in order to create that, we can actually put it into the responder. And of course this is going to be a JSON responder, so we need to make sure that we have now a JSON responder to do whatever we need. Okay, so let me clone this, and we're gonna call it hello JSON responder. And of course it's gonna get this interface, it's gonna get whatever. Now the results will be what is being put into the data node. Let me close a couple of things here so we can see so the results will come here where the data is. Let me just copy this and move it over here. Formatting is not great, but we can still figure out what's going on. Alright, so what we need is a payload, or we use result, we use content, let's use output equals an array of data. Let's leave those empty for now, and autocomplete is pissing me off. Errors, which will be that. Meta will be an array of different things. So the data can be this. Okay, so in the meta we need code. For now let's put 200 hash. Let's put this on empty string message success, and then timestamp. Hold on. Equals alright, and the timestamp, what we can do is we can calculate up here. Equals double yeah, might as well date and UTC. And also what we want is for this to be timestamp format yeah, just leave it like this, that's fine. Now, there you go, a little bit alignment here. And what we need to do is we have this array. Let's get rid of this part. And what we need to do is we need to return it as JSON. Now, oh, we didn't get the content. So we need to take the content and dump it in the data array. There you go. So now if I go back to my code, I will still see hello world, but the reason I do see hello world is because in the index we defined that I need this, the hello responder text. We don't have the hello responder JSON. So let's fix that. Back in the container. And then this one would be JSON. This one will be JSON. And if we go down here and just create a new private class, private method, and that will be my JSON here. There we go. So now in my index I have hello responder text, but if I change it to responder JSON in my code, I will end up with this. And if I refresh it and put pretty print, you're gonna see the difference of the previous output to this one. So now we have a structure that comes back with data, whatever we want to send it, and it keeps on updating, I think. Yes. So it's 11, 12, 13. And the errors is nothing. The meta tells you that it's a code 200 success, and there's the hash, and then it's the timestamp. So we changed the output straight up to a JSON by making just a few changes and introducing this JSON responder. Why don't we calculate the hash now? The idea that I had was to use SHA-1. I know it's not a very secure hashing algorithm, but it will actually help us do what we need to do. So this is just for verification purposes. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this here the way it is, but do some calculations down here. So let's say data errors equals data, and then that will be the output data, and then errors equal output errors. So that's my little payload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to code this. Okay. For now, yeah, just leave that. That's fine. Now, actually, no. Just get that out. And JSON code will return false. All right, we can worry about the exception a little bit later. So for now, let's leave it like this. So encoded equals false equals encoded, and then that one will be either an empty string or itself. And then the timestamp, we have it already, so we're gonna say hash equals SHA1 of timestamp. Should we do this with the format or not? Let's do it with a format. That's fine. Plus encoded. Actually, let's make a slight change here. Less calculations. It's this. Let's call this datetime here. And then this sh1 will be on the datetime plus encoded. And now this hash is something that we can use here. And also what I want to do is I want to do an e tag equals sha1 of the encoded. So the hash will be the sha1 of the datetime plus these two things. The e tag will be the sha1 of these two things, and this is how we're going to use them. So we already have the datetime up there. What we need to do is output meta hash equals hash, so it's going to replace this. And now what we need to do is this response set content type application JSON. It's not necessary to put that because we're using set JSON content, but I like to do that. And then of course set header will be e tag, and that will be the e tag. And while we're at it, set JSON content. I could chain this and send it, but that's perfectly fine. So now if I refresh my page here, I am going to see a hash. And if I take this and then this, as well as the timestamp, and I add the timestamp to a JSON encoding of this and put SHA1 on those, then I should get this particular string. And that's a way if you want to validate the payload that came in, just in case it got I don't know, compromised or anything like that. So that's a way for us to see what's going on, and we are returning things now in a little bit more of an API way. Okay, so now that we got everything sorted out here with regards to what is going on with our response, we created our interfaces, we're moving along with this application. Let's give this a shot to try and create a response that will be emitted by our application without me having to do this. Okay, so the goal is to get rid of this and have the responder do its job, populate the response object, and then the application itself is responsible for sending data out. Okay, so let's create a folder under our domain that will be called middleware. And excuse me. And in that middleware, all we're going to have to do is create one middleware that we will be emitting the response back. And this is going to become more important a little bit later down the line, but for now, let's copy this class so we can have something. We're going to call it response. Yeah, response sender or response emitter, whatever you guys want to call it. So it's under middleware, which is fine. We need final read-only class response sender. And that one will have only one invoke, which will be response interface. And we'll return response interface. And what it will do is response send, actually return. Very simple. All we're doing is just sending something. Now we have it here as a send, right? But how are we going to tie this class here to our application? Well, let's go back to our index, and we can certainly introduce the new responder sender into our application. So in order to do that, we're going to take advantage of another a middleware hook point, which there's only three. There's the before, after, and finish. So what we're going to do is, let's say above the not found will be application finish. So as soon as you finish everything that you have to do, this is what you're going to do. So function use container, yes, and then we're going to need to do response equals container get shared container response, because we need it. Sender equals new response sender, and then all we will do is sender invoke and response. Okay, so what we're doing is we're creating this class here, we're throwing the response in it, and we're just invoking it. Okay, now once we run this thing, it's gonna cause us a lot of problems because it says response has already been sent. Okay, as such, how can this happen? Well, you see that once this piece of code has been executed and the action handler called everything, we're still in the hello part, we got the domain payload, we sent that payload into the responder, and it came to this hello JSON responder, right? But this hello JSON responder does some calculation, then it calls this response send. So once this response send is there, the headers are already sent back, and when it goes back to the resend to this one here, then it's as if you're calling well, you are calling the response twice. So if I remove this one here and go back to Brave, you're gonna see that this thing is gone. And all of a sudden now, by utilizing a little bit the REST API, we have a way to send our response at the very end of the request. And this is how we start, the routes are being set, we're just telling it use this this hook here, the finish, when everything has been done, and use this one here when you don't find anything. So this is a way that we manage to create everything that we need in terms of how the response should be sent. One thing to note about this finish that we have, I'm gonna pull up the Phalcon code here, and this is the code for handling the request. Okay, so this is the handle of the micro. So it goes and does certain things, checks the router, checks the matching route and all that stuff, checks the before handlers. Remember I mentioned that we have the before, after, and finish. Does whatever it needs to do, comes back down here, that does all the binding after it executes the route, and here is where it checks all the after handlers, and that's pretty much done. Now we come to the meat, so to speak. Checks the finish handlers. So in the finish handlers, you can have more than one. It's and they are executed in the order that they have been defined. For us, we just had only one. So the finish handler was the one that we wanted to execute, and we executed it, and it comes, I believe, here, because it is a callable, it's not a middleware interface, and it calls it the call status func array and all that stuff. And then after this exception, it comes down here and it checks whether the method that was called for this route, if it has returned something. You might say return hello or whatever. If it does, then it takes it down here and it injects it in the content, and then it sends it. As such, if your methods, the actions for that matter, return strings, you will have an issue with headers already sent, because the micro application will try to send the response again. Now, since we did the finish and we have a callable and the anonymous function, and we've already sent the response, and we're not returning a string from our action, it will come up here. It will see that there's no return value, it's not a string, it's null. Then we'll come down here, and then it will say if the return value is the response itself, and you have not sent and if you haven't sent the response already, then send it. So this piece of code is not going to execute, and this piece of code is not going to execute. So we're not going to have an issue with duplicate responses sent. This is important because if you change your code somewhere here and your hello service or whatever, or your responder does not return the response, it returns hello or something, you're gonna see things differently. So coming back to our code, and I hope that the description about how the responses are being sent is clear. We just changed how we respond. We're using just a JSON object. So the hello responder is pretty much not going to be needed. The text responder is not going to be needed anymore. So we can just remove this. And what we can do is we can take the JSON responder and we can put it under services if you want. Or maybe we can just put it here and then put this one under services, or just leave it as is, I guess. We can just leave it as is, and we can just rename it to JSON responder, because we can certainly use it with any service that we want. Since it does implement the responder interface and it does get the payload, it will always be receiving the same stuff. And then down here we can make changes when different error codes come in, or so on and so forth. So we need to go back to the container and we need to change this to JSON Responder. We're not going to use the hello text responder anymore. And up here, the text one can be gone. This one can be gone. And we can just name this get service responder JSON. Get rid of the hello. So up here in the response sender, we just in the action handler, we just invoke whatever we want, and we have the responder. And this one will be hello responder JSON. One last thing for this series, for this particular video, is to create some sort of a manager for our environment, because we are going to start needing we are going to need to read some of these variables here with the env, and it would be nice to have some sort of a manager that will take care of all of this for us, so that whenever we want to get something, we don't have to play around with the .env or the env variables and so on and so forth. That will make our code a lot easier to test and to retrieve data from those environment variables. There's plenty of ways of doing this. What we can do is we can create a directory env manager, and actually no, let's call it environment, or env, that's fine. And in here, let's create a new PHP class, which will be env manager. Let's copy our little dog block here. And what are we going to do with this env manager? Well, we need to make sure that we're able to pick things up from the underscore env as well as the get-env. So in order for us to do that, we're going to have to load everything from .env. However, let's think a little bit ahead. Thinking ahead, we could take this application and put it into Azure or Amazon Web Services or somewhere else, where we can utilize services that they offer in order to keep secrets or parameters. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this environment manager with adapters, and each of those adapters is going to be accessing one area of where those variables come from. The easiest one would be the .env, but then you can certainly expand that to create a different adapter to read AWS or anything like that. So let's create another folder called adapters, and what we can do is, for starters, let's create an interface. So adapter interface, and what this interface would do is it will have, let's say it's going to be a public function load, and it will have array options, and then that will return an array. The idea is that we can pass into this adapter some options that we have, and then that one will do its work and it will return all the whole environment back to us. Okay, so What I'm thinking of is, let's create a new PHP class .env, and this class will be, let me just put the doc block there, implements adapter interface, and then let's add the method stubs. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is, for starters, for .env to work, it needs to be able to read where the .env file is. So we will need to pass the file, where the file location is. So our options is going to contain the file path. So file path equals options file path, or let's make it null, and then let's have a look. What we can do is check if the file path is empty and if the file path exists. So we can do if true equals empty, too many equals file path, or true not equals file exists file path. Then we're gonna throw new exception, let's put it that way, and then say the env file does not and then file path. Close that. So that's our safety net. What we're gonna do is we need to use .env equals .env. It's this one. Create immutable file path, and let's rename this with an alias. Okay, and then all we need to do is .env load. Now this is the best part. Once this runs, let's simplify this. Once this runs, the .env is going to populate the superglobal $_env with whatever parameters, whatever settings we had in our .env file. So what we need to do is we need to return env. Alright, so that's gonna return whatever we have in there. Now we are gonna have issues here with PHP code sniffer, with PHP stand, because all these things are not being properly defined as arrays and how they should interfere. We're going to get to that in a few moments, but for now we have an adapter. Let's go back to our env manager and see how we can tie this adapter to whatever is going on. So in order for us to be able to call the env manager and have it create the necessary adapter based on a variable that we will send in, we need a factory. So let's create one. And what we're going to do is we're not going to use the factory trait that exists in Phalcon, although you can certainly do it. I'd like to do this the old-fashioned way, in a sense, just create the class from scratch, and you're going to be able to see how this one goes. And if you want to, in your implementation, you can scrap half of it at least and take advantage of the factory trait, or do the implementation that you want. for your code. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two arrays. One is the mapper and one is the services or instances, if you like. Mapper is the one that will hold the definition, so the string to the class name of the adapter, and the instances array is going to be the one that holds the instantiated adapters that are in memory. So first and foremost, well, we don't really need to instantiate anything. We just have protected function get adapters. And that one will return the .env class. Now we need to have a method to get it. So we need a new instance to have string name and then mixed whatever parameters we want to pass. And this one will return adapter interface. And what we need to do here is we need to say if true is set, since this is name, the definition equals should we throw the exception here or not? Let's throw the exception here. So if true is set this mapper name, throw a new exception, service is not registered. And then this is going to be the normal exception. Just leave it for now. Definition equals this mapper name, and then instance equals new definition parameters. This one will be an adapter interface, and then this instance's name equals instance, and return this instance's name. And also we need to register the mapper, so let's do that in the constructor. Construct, and we don't need any options, so for each this get adapters as adapter and then class name. What we're gonna do is we're gonna say this mapper adapter equals class name. Alright, so that's what we're gonna need to do here. So we're just passing the array to that, and actually it's easier to do it this way. Perhaps not even use a mapper. So we could do this mapper equals this get adapters, because that one will copy one array to another, but the way we're using this mapper, we could potentially not even use the mapper array and just say adapters equals this get adapters, definition equals this, or no, adapters name, and then we're good to go. We don't even need the constructor, and we don't even need the mapper. All we will do is move this up here, and then we're gonna say if adapters. There you go. So that one makes it a lot simpler. We don't need a lot of stuff in here. Just the instances array, and the instances array PHP stand complaints, but we're gonna fix all those a little bit later. So we got our factory here, so we need to put everything together and just make sure that our env manager works. So let's go back here. What we need to do is we need to make sure that this thing loads things only once. So what we're going to do is private static bool equals false. Okay, and we need to call load here, right? So alright, let's put the load method here. Alright, so what we're going to do in this load method is we're going to put everything in an array and then use that array in our response. So let's create the array as well. Private static array settings. Alright, so first things first, if true not equals self is loaded, and then we do self is loaded equals true at the very end, or yeah, might as well. So now what we need to do is we need to create a factory, and then we need to get the options that exist and figure out what we need to do. All right. So what would our options be? Let's think about this. Well, we will need to pass what the adapter is for the .env to run, and we need to pass the file path. So let's have a look. Get options, and that one will return an array. And here what we need to do is we need to take whatever is in the environment for the time being. So we are gonna get merge get env, and then the env. So this one has both, and the env overwrites the get env. So let's have a quick look here in the env. We don't have anything here. All right. So in the manager, we're gonna call the, let's say, env adapter and then what we're gonna do is adapter equals envs, and then I want this to be my default. And after that, we need to figure out where the file path is. So file equals that. Let's leave this empty for now, and then return adapter and file path. Actually, let's put some this one will return this array for us for now, because we only have .env. And what we need to do is we need to get this array and figure out where we are actually. So let's create the factory. And let's get the options. Self get options. Alright, so this one will return us what we need to, and let's say adapter equals options adapter, and what we need to do is we need to return whatever was given to us by this .env adapter. So we got the options there, which is just a couple of things, but let's keep a copy of the existing environment. So we're calling this again. Okay, array merge. So we're copying this and we're keeping everything that's in here. Then we need to call the instance equals env the factory, and that one will be new instance, will be adapter, and what would you do? Oh, the options, I forgot, we load the options in the load. So we got this adapter, and now we need to load options, and what that will return is not an instance, it will return an array, which will be how should we call this? Options again, I guess. And then this one will load everything from .env. What we need to do is env equals array merge ends and options. So we're merging the whatever we had before here in the whole environment with whatever came in, and then in the settings we need to store them. Right, so that's gonna be my environment, and okay, so we need to figure out a way also to get something, so that is gonna be one of my entry points. and I'm wondering if I should change it to a get and get int and whatever. But let's do a public static function get. That will be a string key, and then we can have a bool or an int or a string or a null default value, and then default value will be null, and that one will return either a bool, an int, string, or a null, clearly. And then it will be return self settings key or the default value. So that's gonna be my get. Also, I have to figure out the path. It would be nice to have the path back. So let's figure out exactly what the path of the application is. So public static function app path string path equals this, returns string, and that one will be return dir name, and then that's not gonna be enough. It's gonna be $path will be directory separator plus path or path. This one will make it work. Now, problem is I don't remember how many levels up we are. So we're here. So dir name is this, dir name 2, dir name 3, and then 4 will get you to the SRC, and 5, I think it's 5. And we'll figure this out exactly, because we need to go to this top level here above SRC. So we need to go back 5 levels from where this particular method is. So that looks relatively okay for now. We definitely want to make changes to this, but let's write a couple of tests, see how this one would work, and then we can figure out the PHP stand and other things, and then start introducing this env manager into our application. One more thing that we need to do is we need to start distinguishing where we're going to be throwing exceptions and where they're coming from. So what we need to do is we need to create a new exceptions directory, and in there we can create different exception classes that will allow us to distinguish where things are coming from. So one of the exceptions that I could create, and let me just copy the doc block here, is if you recall, here in the factory we have an exception here that the service is not registered. So I could easily create an exception of I would say invalid configuration. And then that one would extend exception. So I could do that. Invalid argument exception, and what I can do is I can just leave it like this. That one will be enough for now. So now this invalid configuration argument, I can go into this factory here and say invalid throw new, and then let's say service is not registered. Makes it a little bit better here. Let's see, in the .env we do have one here as well, so we can put invalid configuration argument. I think the env file does not exist. Well, that's the problem here. If it's empty or the file doesn't exist, let's cast this to a string. That will make it a little bit easier, because if it's empty, if it doesn't exist, okay. So adapter interface is fine. This one of my exceptions. The env factory has its exceptions. The env manager does not throw exceptions for now. And let's close these guys. So let's have a quick look at what we can do with our tests. So we need to create a new directory called unit, and in that unit we need to add a new class. Let's call it abstract unit test case. And I think I have this. Nope, I didn't have that copied. Let's copy the doc block here. And this class, what it's gonna do is gonna be abstract, and then it will extend test case from PHP framework. Alright, and we're going to use this to help us later on with additional things that we want to help us with our tests, setting up the tests and so on and so forth. So for instance, one of the methods that I already have created is to get a strong password, right? So I'm just going to copy it here. Because we are going to need one of those. That's fine. And yeah, that's just one of the methods. So what we need to do is we need to start creating certain tests for what we're doing. So let's replicate our structure, our folder structure here. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a new PHP class, and let's say, actually let's create a directory first, and the directory will be domain, and then the next thing will be services environment. So we're mapping this here. Actually, it's not environment, it's env. And in here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start testing let's say the EMV factory. Let's paste our little thing here. This. Okay, so what the EMV factory needs to do is final extends abstract that, and then we need public function test load, and then it will be void. And what we need to do is factory equals new env factory, and what we need to do is we need to say dot env equals factory new instance dot env dot env. Okay, and then in order to test this, we're gonna say class equals dot env class, and this assert instance of class comma dot env. Alright, so that's one of our tests. And if you remember in the composer JSON, the scripts that we have test unit, unit coverage, and unit coverage HTML. So we're gonna run composer test unit coverage HTML. Alright, one test has been completed. Let's go back to this. Let's open a new folder and load up the test results. So if you recall, in the tests we had the output folder, and in there we made sure that it does exist, because this is where the PHP unit is going to be throwing all these generated files. So if we go back to our domain, we're going to services, we're going to the env factory, pardon for the dogs, and we have good coverage here, but we have an exception here that is not covered. So let's quickly test that. In order to test the exception, we just need to create a very simple test where we're going to pass a totally unknown name, and we're going to check whether the exception has been thrown. So public function test unknown service, that will be void. So what we need is this, and let's call it unknown, because we know that that doesn't exist. But for this test to succeed, we need to make sure that we are getting the exception that we expect. Expect exception, and that will be an invalid configuration exception class, and then this expect exception message. The autocomplete doesn't love me today. Service unknown does not exist. Probably this is not going to work. I don't remember putting, I don't think I put these. Yeah. Alright, so service unknown is not registered. That's what we're throwing. There you go. And then if we go back to our browser and we refresh, now this class has 100% code coverage. And then we can do the same thing with the env manager as well as the adapters. Alright, so let's have a look about the adapter, what we can do. Maybe we can create a sample file or something. Yeah, that might be a good idea. Create a sample file and then it will actually read what we expect it to read. Now .env has already been tested to death by vLucas and the contributors of that repository, so we don't have to test that. All we have to do is test whether our integration is reading the files as expected. Let us create a fixtures folder where we can put some assets in there so that we're able to test. For that, we're going to replicate the directory structure so that we know where things are coming from. Of course, it's not necessary. It makes it easier for me, at least, to have a look at what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have domain services env, and in here we're going to need to create a new env file, and then we're going to have sample string equals value. Alright, something like this. And now all we need to do is we need to make sure that we know where this thing is coming from. Let's go back here, and we're gonna create a folder called adapters, and in here we're gonna create a file called .env test. That's where we're gonna test things. So we don't need this yet. So let's have a look. Let's keep the file somewhere. Let's make it so private string env file, and then public non-protected function setup, and then this env file. It's not gonna be that. Sorry, my friend, but it's not like that. What we're gonna do is gonna say env manager app path, and then that will give us whether that will also be a thing that we can have a look whether the file is okay or not. And no, we can forget the directory separator, so that one will be tests fixture, and then it will be domain services, and then env. I'll close it with this. So that should be where my file exists there, and let's have a look. So let's create the first test, which will be public function test load returns test load success rather. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna say dot env equals new dot env r dot env, and then options equals file path because it needs it, and then we're gonna have expected equals sample string. It will be sample int, true and false, and these are gonna be value 1, and then will be true, and that will be false. Let's put the commas here, and now we need to do the actual .env load options, and then we need to make sure that yep. In this case, the autocomplete works really well. And so now we need to do how can we test every single one of those? Because we don't get the whole options from it, so actual array equals alright, let's copy this, let's put it there, and then let's copy this, will be actual that, and then we're gonna have this assert same expected and actual array. Alright, let's run it. Okay, the env does not exist in the specified path. Tests, fixtures, domain services, env. Alright, tests, fixtures, domain services, env. So is this gonna be maybe 6, the level? Should be 5. Let's see. That's the factory test. That's the abstract. Let's go to the .env test. Let's put something like this, assert same this with this env file. The reason I'm doing this is I want to see what the env file has. So the app path has /tests fixtures domain services env. That's not correct. Or is it? If we do 6, that one comes app tests domain env. Oh no, it's again the same thing. I'm wondering why. The .env test should be app path and then the tests fixtures domain services env, and it will help if it's env. instead of ENF, but still it was a typo. Let's go look at this. Let's see if that one. Alright, so app path, if we make this 4 puts it into /app, and then 5 should be app and tests. No, wrong 3. Yeah, app src. Okay, so it's 4 what we want the app to go into this folder here, the top one. And let's have a quick look at the actual file. So the actual file is app tests fixture domain. So we're gonna put a / here. There you go. So we can get rid of this and start loading this guy, and there we go. It was just the path that was wrong. So now in our code coverage, we're seeing that the .env has something that run. We have the invalid configuration argument exception and all that stuff that doesn't exist, that we need to run it. So coming back here, we need to public function test load failure test load file does not exist. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna copy this, paste it in here. We need the load there, and then the file path will be something like tmp or something like that, I guess. Or we can just leave it empty. Actually, test load file empty file path, and that should offer this expect exception. Alright, and then expect exception message will be the env file does not exist at. Okay, and then let's do another one where we specify the folder but it's not correct. Test load file empty. Let's rename this something else. Test load success, right? Test load exception for empty file path, and then test load exception for missing file, and then file would be something in the lines of does not exist. Okay, so let's run this. Excellent, it ran both tests, and if we look at the code coverage, we'll try to cover this part here and also this part here. So if you refresh, this one is fully covered. Going back, we have the env manager. The app path has already been called. And let's do this first, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up. We didn't have enough time to do the middleware. We're gonna do it in the next installment. So let's finish up with our tests. Now down here, env factory test, we're gonna need the env manager test. So let's clone this. Okay, so let's get rid of these. So what we need to do is we need to figure out whether the app path is correct. And then we're gonna cheat a little bit here, because I have to count from here backwards in order to find the actual test. So we're here, that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In theory it should be 5 deer names, but it might not be. So actual equals env manager app path, and then this assert same expected actual. This one will probably be 5, which it is, which is great. What else do we need to do? We need to do a get, I guess. So let's do something in the lines of backup globals true here, just to have it. And then let's do something for the load. Something like this. And then the app, and I think it was file name that we named it, didn't we? Not here. Up and file path. Yeah, might as well. And then this one will be where's my other test? Here, this one. Or not. This one here. There you go. That's where the env file is located. So let's copy that, and that's where we're telling it to go. Okay, so close that. And now we're gonna have values. Actually, would it be values or expected? I guess. Yeah, I'll leave it. Values equals sample string. Int will be 1. It will be true, and sample false, it will be false. So what we need to do is we need to say expected equals values sample string actual, and this one would be get sample string. We can also do something with default as well, so let's go and do that. Comma, let's say default. So this assert same, this assert same, and let's do that a couple more times just to test all the variables. Sample int, so we've got string here, int, true, true, and false, false. So this one would be assert false. So we don't even need the expected. This one would be true. Actually, no, let's do that. Let's leave it as is. Let's leave the assert same. It's gonna be fine. Alright, let's run this. Alright, so we have problems here. env manager 55 is here. So when it's trying to get the string, we need to. Okay, so I understand now. The env manager loads things the way they are, and we have to make sure that it always loads things when we want it. So let me make this a little bit different. Because this is a static class and we don't really know when it's gonna create all that stuff. In addition, when it starts loading things, it has to call load and then initialize it, and then keep everything in an array of sorts, so it doesn't keep on calling exactly the same thing again and again and again. So our env needs to make sure that every single time that this test runs, it's as if it is a brand new test, or I don't know, a brand new execution. So for starters, let me see that it is, because yeah, okay. So this is the thing that I was missing, self load. That's why it wasn't loading anything. That's why we didn't have anything. When you call get, we need to call the load, which will check if everything is loaded, and then use the adapter, the factory, and everything like that to load the environment. Now, because we have this, some tests will fail, primarily because the is loaded is set as true, and then we cannot manipulate it anymore. So for us to to work with that, we need to play a little bit with reflection and make sure that this thing gets loaded every single time the test runs. Public function, no, not public, protected setup. And what we need to do is we need to say reflection equals new reflection class manager class, and then reflection set static property value is loaded equals false, and then reflection, not the env file, it is settings, and then we're gonna put that into an empty array. Alright, so this will ensure that every single time we run any of the tests, it's gonna be a fresh environment. Alright, I don't expect it to fail. Nice. Okay, I expected this because we're expecting 1 and it returns string 1. So let's make a very small change to our load so that it converts these values to what they should be, and it allows us to run things the way we want to. So let's have a quick look in the load. I believe would be fine to look into that. Alright, so we're grabbing these array merge. Okay, so let's do something here which will be let's say array map, and that would be a function, and that would be the value passed for each element that it iterates, and then you will return match value. So it's going to be true will be true, false equals false, and default equals value. And then once this is done, you're going to run that on the envs and then close this. So if I run this, most likely it's going to fail again. Alright, 1 equals 1. Should I do these numeric ones as well? I'm not sure if I should. Because this one has 1 here, and then we have the rest of the stuff. So sample int should be int, but it doesn't. Let me see. Let me comment this out for a sec, just to make sure that the others work. And they do. They do return true and false, and they match with these two. So the issue now is with a sample int, if it's going to return the correct thing. Well, you know what? I'm gonna leave this as a numeric. Of course, it's gonna pass now, because I don't want to cast this as an integer. If it's a numeric, it might mess up things with configurations. So coming back to my code coverage, excellent. I have 100% code coverage here, and that's great. Now, unfortunately, once I run PHP stan, it will start complaining, but we can certainly work on that in the next video. And there you go. It's gonna be very interesting. There you go. It's 14 errors, and it's probably doc types because it doesn't understand what is going on. For instance, the .dnv file here, it says parameter 1 paths of static method.env create immutable expects array string mixed given. So this file path here, line 38, this file path is should be either an array of strings or a string, and it's mixed because it comes from up here. And I could very easily do this. File path will be string, and then it will be file path, and once I run it again, it's going to be 13 errors. So now it starts complaining that you cannot cast a mixed to string, so it thinks that this is mixed. So if I take this one and put it up there and just tell it that the file path will be either a string or a null, then it's probably gonna reduce the errors. There you go, 11. So it's these little things that we have to do just to make sure that whatever parameter we're passing is proper and our code is pristine. So thank you very much for being with me and just coding with me. And we're moving along with this application. This is really good progress. Definitely we're going to do middleware the next time around, and we're going to start creating some proper API endpoints for users to get and to update, the whole CRUD, and that's going to take a few videos. Of course, I want to enable JWT tokens, and I think we can do that a little bit later after we set the initial middleware structure. We can do the CRUD, and then we can apply the middleware with JWT on it. Thank you so much.